This is a CBS News special, Earth Day, a question of survival, with CBS News correspondent Walter Cronkite.
Good evening. A unique day in American history is ending, a day set aside for a nationwide outpouring of mankind seeking its own survival. Earth Day, a day dedicated to enlisting all the citizens of a bountiful country in the common cause of saving life from the deadly byproducts of that bounty, the fouled skies, the filthy waters, the littered earth.
Fact: our genetic makeup is native to this planet, and we suffer significant deterioration and other complications just by traveling into near-Earth orbit missions. So to imagine life anywhere else but here is fun, but folly. Hi, I'm Chris May, host of This Day in Weather History, a podcast from the Weather Network in Canada. We had to do something to wake people up, pay closer attention to living conditions here on planet Earth. We did. This day in weather history.
The gravity of the message of Earth Day still came through. Act or die. We begin our report with Bruce Morton in Denver.
Next to Los Angeles, Denver has the best climate in the country for producing smog. In this unlikely seeming place, the air is threatened. Earth Day is a focus for efforts to save it.
Come on, man. We have one home. We will only ever have one home. Earth. Oh, we can dream all we want of living on other planets, but until we become a totally different species of human, dreaming is as far as we will ever get. So let's make sure we make the best of it. Enter Earth Day, an event to increase public awareness of the world's environmental problems. It was the brainchild of Wisconsin Senator Gaylord Nelson, who was an unabashed environmentalist whose hope was that by creating a lightning rod of attention, he could create a rallying unity to grassroots environmental awareness. It was not to be a massive multimedia push or any sort of television campaign. His plan was for it to start organically, ironically enough, among those who are already woke to the realities of our fate, and from there allow it to grow naturally, so that as more join the movement, it sticks and stays and doesn't just disappear as soon as the day passes and the people go home. His words, quote, "The objective was to get a nationwide demonstration of concern for the environment so large that it would shake the political establishment out of its lethargy and, finally, force this issue permanently onto the national political agenda." End quote. That from Senator Nelson. So there it was, and so it became. Remember that this day in weather history can be enjoyed a number of ways. Right now, you are listening to the full version of today's story on your favorite podcast provider, but there is also the daily podcast video short. They are shot right here in my podcast recording studio, so you get that perspective, and oftentimes they will include visuals from that day's event, from when it happened, in weather history. So after listening to the full story, go check out the podcast video short on television or online anytime at theweathernetwork.com/weather history. Earth Day was started first in the United States on April 22nd, this day in weather history, in 1970. On that day, millions of Americans, including students from thousands of colleges and universities, staged and walked in peaceful rallies, marches, and educational programs across the country. The more conservative portion of the population looked at it with the same disdain that they eyed the hippie movement as it picked up momentum throughout the rest of the 1960s. But it was real, and it was not going anywhere. So in 1970, when we launched the first ever Earth Day, it was a natural progression, and it did indeed drive the environmental awareness in America. The irony is not lost on me, of course, that this happened only a few months after celebrating our first humans to land on and return from an extraterrestrial landmass. So while the world was enamored with leaving the planet and exploring the moon, back here in July of 1970, the Environmental Protection Agency was established by special executive order to regulate and enforce national pollution legislation. But that was not all. The grassroots Earth Day also led to the passage of the Clean Water and Endangered Species Acts. Senator Nelson of Wisconsin had done it. Earth Day has been celebrated on different days by different groups internationally ever since. The United Nations officially celebrates it on the first day of spring, which is normally on or around March 21st. As for our hero, Senator Nelson, on April 22, 1990, the 20th anniversary of Earth Day saw more than 200 million people in 141 countries participate. But more specifically, on that day, Senator Nelson was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by then-sitting President Bill Clinton. This day in weather history. Tomorrow is April 23rd, and we're going back into space. There were 9 Ranger missions that predated the landing of our first man on the moon. And their mission was to fly, orbit, take photos of the moon to try and scope out landing areas, because the then sitting president, John F. Kennedy, he wanted to make sure this was going to fly without fail. The Cold War space race was on, and we're back at it tomorrow on This Day in Weather History with me, your host, Chris May.